Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is our fourth and final iteration of our first ever virtual Sacramento legislative tour. There's so many virtual things that we're doing now. So thank you for joining us. We have some great speakers today. Before I hand it off to our president, we have a word from our sponsor.
At Edison, we know that creating a clean energy future takes teamwork. So while we're modernizing the electric grid, the Garzas modernize their roof to be the first on their block to go solar. We're helping reduce emissions from cars and trucks for cleaner air, so kids on every corner can focus on just being kids. Together, we have all the power we need to build a brighter future for everyone. SCE. Energy for what's ahead.
All right, so thank you to Edison for being one of our ongoing longtime associate members or one of our partners. And now, with no further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our president, Lindsay Horvath.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Marcel, and thank you to your entire team for making this legislative virtual tour possible. It's my honor to serve as your president this year. I see a lot of people joining us, which is really exciting, and we'll certainly make the recording available. I want to thank all of our speakers who are joining us today, especially my friend Eleni Kounalakis, our Lieutenant Governor. I'm just so grateful to everyone who's made time to be with us and talk about those priority issues that are facing all of our residents. Special shout out to my new colleague who's joining us today, John Erickson. I see him on, as well as one of our staff people from West Hollywood, Francisco Contreras, and to all of the team at West Hollywood. I thank you for your support, and for everyone on our executive committee and on our board for Contract Cities. Thank you for the work that you've done with the association. Today is a critical part of doing that work, and to make sure we get right into it, I'm going to turn it back over to Marcel, and thank you, Stacy, for your leadership with the Legislative Committee.
Thank you, Lindsay. And so, as you can see, I changed locations from my virtual background to my home office. So, with no ado, I will now present to you all our Legislative Committee Chair, Stacy Armato.
Marcel, I think we've had plenty of do. Okay.
I thought you were a telemarketer earlier, Steve. So, all right. Please.
Oh, Steve Ty, always coming in hot.
Who's in charge of the mute button? All right, guys. Thank you, Marcel. Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. I have the distinct honor of introducing our first guest, the remarkable Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis. On January 7th, 2019, Ambassador Eleni Kounalakis was sworn in as the 50th Lieutenant Governor of California, becoming the first woman ever to serve in that capacity. If being Lieutenant Governor wasn't enough, she's also the chair of the International Affairs and Trade Development Interagency, having been appointed by Governor Newsom by executive order. From 2010 to 2013, she served as President Obama's ambassador to the Republic of Hungary. Kounalakis was the first Greek American woman, and at the age of 43, one of America's youngest to serve as U.S. ambassador. In 2014, Governor Brown appointed her to chair the California Advisory Council for International Trade and Investment. She was a virtual fellow at the U.S. Department of State, Bureau of Intelligence and Research between 2014 and 2017, specializing in international trade and immigration. Prior to her public service, Lieutenant Governor was president of one of California's most respected housing development firms, AKT Development, where she worked for 18 years. She built master plan communities and delivered quality housing to the Sacramento's region's working families, recognizing her as one of Capital Region's most prominent businesswomen. Passionate about early childhood development, the Lieutenant Governor served as a member of California's first 5 commission and the California Blue Ribbon Commission on Autism. She graduated from Dartmouth College and earned her MBA from UC Berkeley. She also holds an honorary doctorate of law from the American College of Greece. She lives in San Francisco with her husband, veteran journalist Marcos Kounalakis, and their 2 sons. And here's a fun fact. She's also the author, in addition to all the other things that she does, of a highly acclaimed book, Madam Ambassador, 3 Years of Diplomacy, Dinner Parties, and Democracy in Budapest, which was published in 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our shoes on. There's glass everywhere. Madam Lieutenant Governor, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman Armato. Thank you, Mayor Horvat. It's so wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be with all of you. Wow, that was quite an introduction. I don't know where to begin. I believe that you all are meeting today with your ongoing discussion about COVID, our response, what the state is doing, and what cities are doing, and how we are all working together. Mayor Horvat, is that right?
That's exactly right. I am not surprised you are right on it.
So again, let me just say thank you all for the work that you do. I'm very proud to know Mayor Horvat now for the last couple of years, and I know how hard you all are working during these unprecedented and extraordinary times. It has been a tough row to hoe for the state of California, but without getting too into the weeds, because I think we all know this. We were the first state to come out with the statewide stay-at-home order. We persisted during the early months in buying PPE and responding to the uncertainty at the time, and working with the Trump administration, which had many challenges. And then in flattening our curve, which we did remarkably successfully. There was a summer spike, but we got that back under control. And in the fall, we started to see counties reopening, outdoor dining, people going back to work, some schools able to reopen, again, mostly private schools, unfortunately, not enough public schools, but starting and moving in the right direction. And then this winter spike hit. To give a little bit of perspective, again, from the state level, we had going into December, our fatalities for the state were at about 20,000 fatalities, every one a tragedy. But when you compared that to New York State, a state half our size, they had twice as many fatalities. But when the winter spike hit, for a variety of reasons, that the virus just traveled like wildfire, we went from about a 2.5% infection rate all the way up to a peak of about 13.5% infection rate or positivity rate in our testing. And our fatality rate doubled. So we had about 20,000 fatalities going into December. December and January, we tragically lost another 20,000 people. So just to give you some scale of what has been happening in terms of how to quantify this at the state level. Issuing the additional stay-at-home order that the governor did in December has had a positive result. Remember, he always talked about a dimmer switch. He dialed that switch back, and we now are at about 6.9% positivity rate in our 14-day rate. Again, that's statewide, so it varies depending on where you are, but it is a significant reduction. So the dialing back has worked. We're reflattening the curve again. Restaurants have been able to reopen again for outdoor dining, personal services, hair salons have been able to reopen, but people are getting weary. And now, of course, all eyes are on vaccine distribution. So I'm very fortunate to have a very positive working relationship with the governor. He allows me to have briefings from his administration when I ask for them. So I've had a very good window into the work being done by the administration, and also been able to be helpful in playing a role in this all hands on deck moment. But I can tell you that the focus on vaccine distribution is first and foremost among everything else. But the reality is there are nowhere near enough vaccines to go around. So we have received somewhere over 6 million doses for the state. And we have overseen the administration of about 4 million of those doses. But we are a state of 40 million people, and we need 2 doses each. So we're just at the beginning of this process. It is going to take time. It has certainly not been without its bumps in the road already. I know it's disappointing. I know it's frustrating, but the focus is very directly on doing everything we can to get this rollout as quickly as possible, to get in to the areas where the virus is spreading the fastest and where communities, particularly communities of color, are being disproportionately affected, where we get those who are most likely to perish if they catch it. That's the 65 and up category, to get those folks vaccinated quickly and efficiently and effectively. And to do it, again, the curves that I'm looking at are getting the vaccine, and then distributing the vaccine, versus being able to keep businesses open and not have, prevent another spike, so that we don't have to dial the dimmer switch back again before we get through what we have going on. One more thing, just to leave you with a positive thought here. We have our daughter of California, Kamala Harris, in the White House, along with President Joe Biden. They are working, I know you all are following this probably even more closely than I am, on another relief package. We need more support for our cities. There is no question about it. You have been disproportionately impacted by the loss of tourism dollars. And that is really something that I'm very hopeful about. And at the same time, our state budget saw a $15 billion surplus, which is good news, particularly compared to what we thought it was going to be in the May revise. And so having that surplus, injecting much needed funds into small and medium-sized businesses in your communities is critically important, as well as, again, making sure that funds are being spent to help with the recovery effort and the distribution effort for vaccines. So Mayor Horvath, that's kind of my overview of things that I think might be important just from a state level to connect with all of you. I'm happy to answer a question or two. I know you have business of the day to attend to. And again, thank you so much for inviting me to be with you.
Well, thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for that update. And I want to open it up to, since you do have the time maybe for a question. If anyone in attendance has a question, please raise your hand. We are extremely lucky to have Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis with us today. And I see Britt Huff, you have your hand up. Please ask your question.
Yes, wonderful to see you. Thank you for being with us. You bring back wonderful memories of over a year ago in January, when we actually were able to go to Sacramento in person, and you were kind enough to speak with us then, thanks to Lindsay's coordination of that. My question is which is on the upper mind of all of our constituents, is what is the holdup on the shortage, and what can be done about that in terms of the vaccines? Because initially we sort of thought it was a local problem. We had a lot of problems with people accessing the websites and registering, but I think we've worked through that, and we've streamlined things that are getting much better, but the big problem is the shortage. And what do you see as specifically can be done about that?
So thank you for the question. Again, I really recognize there's a lot of frustration. I share it. Getting information has not been easy, but my previous life, I served in the federal government. From the very beginning, the vaccine rollout should have been entirely orchestrated by the federal government. So this disjointed approach that was originally put in place by the Trump administration has made it very difficult. California sets the standards. We have some visibility. But as you know, vaccines are going directly from the federal government to the counties or to the third-party administrators of the vaccines, and the who can be eligible to get it varies from county to county. And there's just been a lot of it's been like a mom and pop approach to getting information to people about how to get the vaccines, whether they're eligible, and who is administering them. So I'm very heartened when I see the federal government moving in to do these mass vaccination sites, like the one where the governor was yesterday at the Oakland Coliseum. There are more in the works, I know, down in Southern California as well. And I think that we're going to get better at this. At the same time, I just think that it's helpful to recognize there is not enough to go around. If you look at the first two tiers of eligibility right now, 3 million for frontline healthcare workers and people either working or living in assisted living facilities. 3 million, that's 6 million doses. And then another 6 million in the 65 and up and first responders. That's actually 6 million in 65 and up, and another about 3 million for first responders. So we're already looking at almost 12 million people, 24 million doses that we need to get to before we can get to the next level. And we have 6 million that have come through. So for me, perspective always helps. Should we be getting these distributed faster? Absolutely. But what we really need are more doses coming into the state of California, and that is entirely determined by the federal government. And thankfully now we have competent leadership in Washington to help us get it distributed, in my opinion.
Thank you very much for answering that question, Lieutenant Governor. We have one more question, if you'll give us a couple more minutes. Thank you. And it's from Councilmember Dr. Julian Gold. How do we get more money directly to our smaller cities in California?
Well, Julian, you know how it is that there are so many different pots of money, so many ways to distribute it. I mentioned the incredibly important urgency of more stimulus from the federal government that President Biden is working on with Speaker Nancy Pelosi to try to get a package that will include aid to cities. Trump would not have it. That's why nothing came to you during the December stimulus package. But in terms of more aid from the state directly into the cities, you know, I think that it's more likely that what you're going to see in the stimulus through the budget is that rather than coming directly to city coffers, it goes to businesses through the small business allocations. It goes to through Project Home Key, you know, $750 million has been spent already. 6,000 homeless people have moved into permanent housing in facilities, 100 facilities across the state that have been purchased through that program. So I think you're more likely to see that the avenues of funding from the state through the surplus itself are likely to go into through these programs. And if you'd like to talk to me or my staff about it, I'm happy to do it. I will tell you this, you know, sometimes I I roll my eyes when someone says, go to my website, but our state website is enormously helpful. It's the covid19.ca.gov that will help illuminate how businesses can access the programs that are going to be funded or already being funded by the state government, as well as how to help direct your constituents to everything from finding out if they're eligible for a vaccine, finding out if they're eligible for Great Plates program for seniors that has served 25 million people so far in the state of California since COVID hit. So unfortunately, there's no kind of spigot, I would say, except for through the federal government, but more there is just an assembly of programs and the ability, our ability as elected officials to help our constituents find out about those programs and access them is super, super important.
Well, thank you very much, Lieutenant Governor, for taking some extra time and being so gracious to answer questions by our members. And just thank you so much for your leadership, for being here with us today. We're so inspired by you and so grateful for your service. Thank you so much. And we can give you a virtual round of applause. I wish we could do this in person, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Stacy. Thank you to all that you do during these unprecedented times. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, one step at a time, but let's get through it together.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. We were so lucky to have the Lieutenant Governor with us. I want to look to Marcel to see if our next guest is with us. Is Senator Susan Rubio in attendance?
I'm looking, but I don't see her. So if you're out there, Senator, please make some noise, wave your hands.
Just got a message, Marcel. This is Jorge. She's ready. She's logging on. We should have her shortly.
Terrific.
Oh, there she is. I see her. So why don't you go ahead and do her intro, Stacy, and then we'll move forward.
Will do. Thank you very much. All right, I see her logging on. And next up, we have Senator Susan Rubio with us. Senator Rubio was born in Juarez, Mexico, and is the proud daughter of a former bracero worker and housekeeper. Her father came to the United States through the bracero program in Texas, and after the program ended, her father continued working on farms and eventually settled in California. Senator Rubio has stated that her upbringing and personal family experiences have taught her the importance of hard work and determination. That work ethic helped her get elected to the California State Senate in 2018. Senator Rubio represents District 22 in the San Gabriel Valley. Her district is comprised of Alhambra, Azusa, El Monte, Temple City, and West Covina, as well as the communities of East Pasadena, South San Gabriel, and West Puente Valley, among many more. Senator Rubio was first elected as a city clerk in Baldwin Park in 2005, where she focused on providing equitable service, transparency, best practices, and protecting democracy for city residents. In 2009, she was elected to the Baldwin Park City Council. She worked on policies that gave women equal representation on city commissions, created a domestic violence program, and implemented tougher environmental rules. She was also a public school teacher for 17 years in Baldwin Park and Monrovia school districts. Senator Rubio attended Azusa Pacific University, where she earned her master's degree in education and multiple subject teaching credential. And here's a fun fact. Senator Rubio joined her sister, Blanca Rubio, in the Assembly, being the first sisters in state history to serve together in the legislature. They're fondly known as the dynamic duo. Please join me in virtually welcoming Senator Rubio. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's just so great to see everyone. First of all, we all have to start with the fact that I was a former council member, worked really hard to ensure our communities were sustainable. And I see a lot of friends here who I've met throughout the years, actually through these, through contract cities and other city programs. So I'm just honored to be here and be part of this conversation. I know that so many of our cities are struggling, as I get the calls every single day. The pandemic has really challenged all of us, not just personally, professionally, but as leaders in our community. And it becomes harder and harder to lead when we're lacking resources and so many other challenges. So I just really quickly just wanted to share some of the things that I've been working on since I started here in the legislature. And again, always with this local mind frame that I know that a lot of my colleagues would be asking for me to focus on, local control for our cities, support for local businesses. As we know, that's part of what gives our local cities revenue stream to provide programs and public safety and everything else that we need. Last year, I was leading a group of, it was called a Housing Production Working Group. It was a few of us, around 6 members of the Senate. I know that the biggest conversation I remember having, I think it was the year before, was SB 50, which was such a conversation starter everywhere I went. A lot of our local cities were really upset over this policy that was going to impose certain things on local communities, and they really didn't have a say so as where projects got built. And so through that, I met with at least 15 of my city managers and a lot of my local elected leaders who often tell me what they want to see, for our local communities. And so that sort of started the conversation on creating a housing group that would really take input from all our local elected leaders. And some of you have been part of those conversations. So we selected members of the state Senate, but very specifically from all areas of California. One of the issues that I had as a local council member was sometimes policies got passed and it really didn't always work for our region or our communities. And so I always thought in my head that I always wanted to be more balanced in terms of how it applies to different regions at different times. So this working group has a member from up north, San Francisco area, other from down south, the coastal area, myself from Southern California. And so we really wanted a balanced approach to creating housing policy. So last year we came up with 5 housing production bills. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19 and I think we lost approximately 3 months in the legislature. We had to close down and we were not allowed in the building. They didn't make it to the finish line. However, I wanted to share a little bit of those bills because, it almost feels to me like everything goes hand in hand. If we spruce up production, then there's more jobs, there's more funding flowing through our communities and our cities, which I think is where all my communities are, constantly reaching out saying that having to put funding into COVID and COVID testing and testing sites has really challenged their funding, sources. And so I think that this is key in meeting these bills for housing production because all our communities can use that those jobs and also figure out how to give you guys back local control. So I wanted to share that we have a bill in the works, SB 6, which is called the Neighborhood Homes Act. And again, I saw it as a tool to allow local governments to meet the RENA goals. It's still in the works and we're still working at it. And so sometimes I'm afraid to get ahead of myself because, the legislative session is long and sometimes changes happen throughout the year. But I also have another bill, SB 7, which is the Housing Plus Jobs Expansion and Extension Act. This is meant to streamline CEQA, which we know from hearing from our local communities and personally experiencing myself. Sometimes CEQA could be a hindrance in terms of how fast we get housing done in California. And a lot of times I have to say it's used as a delay tactic, and a lot of our investors or developers sometimes get a little frustrated and walk away from projects because it's taking too long. So hopefully SB 7 will help with expedite CEQA requirements to get these projects done. We have several others, and like I said, I'm just going to leave it at that. There's 5 major bills that we have going on in terms of housing production. One in particular particular that I think it's important to note is we're really exploring a bill that's going to create a funding mechanism to help local communities as it pertains to infrastructure. I know sometimes when we think of housing, we don't think of, the stress on our pipelines and water sources. And so we're working on some revenue on that end to make sure that local cities have funding for infrastructure to be able to produce more housing. And so again, I try to limit the conversation because things may change. It's a long legislative year. And I just wanted to give you a little sense of what we're working on right now. I also belong to another working group. I'm a co-chair in a working group that's tackling climate change issues as well as wildfires. That's been one of the most pressing issues in the last 5 years. In California, we know that the last 5 years have been the deadliest and the most expensive fires we've had in the history. So we really want to put some funding into trying to mitigate the fires. We want to also put funding sources for local communities that are impacted more heavily than others. I know for me, I live in the San Gabriel Valley, and I had never seen fires that close to us. We have the Bobcat fires that I could literally see from my house. And so they're not only getting longer, but they're also coming inland a little more often than not. And so right now we're working on wildfire funding. We're working on climate change funding to tackle some of the pressing issues that, again, a lot of our communities are dealing with. So there's a lot going on. And I just wanted to make myself available, not only to share a little bit of what's going on and give you a sense of how we're doing things here in the legislature. We haven't been able to have our full staff. We've been very careful. And as we ask our communities to be safe, we have to also be safe ourselves. So we're not allowed a staff in the Capitol. We're not allowing the public in the Capitol as well. So literally we are in the office by ourselves, and sometimes they'll allow one staff member. So as you can see, the way we do business has really been changed due to COVID. We're still being, I would say, very responsive to our communities and working just as hard. It's just, for me personally, it's making me work longer hours and a lot more time since I have to do a lot of the work myself. But nonetheless, we hear the concerns of all our local communities. We hear the concern for me, my district. I am a teacher. We're losing enrollment every single day. So I'm also working on policy to help our school districts with funding and education. Right now, I have a bill that would mandate kindergarten, which is, strange to me being a teacher, why it hasn't been mandatory in all these years. I know that if you're parents out there, you send your kids out to kinder, but you don't know that it's not a mandate. A lot of parents, due to COVID-19, will end up keeping their children at home, but we also know that that translates to ADA funding for school districts. And so I'm doing a lot of work on the education front as well. I know that this is a different group. I could go into my domestic violence bills, and there's so much in the works, but I really wanted to just say hello to all of you. Thank you for inviting me. I always feel like I'm home because I recognize half of the faces here. And I always just want you to know that I'm always thinking locally. I'm always thinking how to balance support for people as well as our local cities and local leaders. I know that many of you that sit on the diocese get to hear the frustration, the families coming at you, asking for services and money. And so that's what we hear. But I want to be here as a resource. I want to be here to really hear some of your concerns on some of the bills. I think last year, if I remember correctly, I met with probably 20 local electeds just to get their thoughts on housing bills, whether they wanted me to support it or oppose it. And SB 50 was one of the bills I opposed due to so many of my local elected leaders calling me saying don't support it. But I didn't support it with the understanding that I was going to work on housing production bills. And, you're not always going to be happy 100%, but I did fight very hard for local control, local funding. I was hoping it passed last year, but we weren't successful, but I'm hopeful that we can do that this year. I'm here to support you. So I'll give you the floor and see if there's anything that I can address, any questions that you have. And I'm sorry, one more thing that I wanted to share. When I was campaigning, one of the things that I kept hearing over and over from my community as it pertains to their priorities was, housing and homelessness. So the first bill I had was, it was a regional housing trust. So I created the San Gabriel Valley Regional Housing Trust that I turned over to the COG. And so far it seems to be working. I know we're Los Angeles County, but sometimes LA County is so large that our local communities further away don't necessarily always feel included in the funding sources. So this regional housing trust is already working on 3 major projects, one in Pomona, one in Claremont, and one in El Monte. And I understand that right now the housing trust has applied for a grant for $1 million matching dollar grant. So hopefully that this will help continue to bring housing to our region, funding to our region, and whatever I can do moving forward, please let me know. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Rubio, for being here with us today and sharing some of those thoughtful updates, and especially addressing at the end there the success with your with SB 751 that created the Regional Housing Trust. And it's an effort that we're working on. Also, we would love to talk with you outside of this meeting on some efforts we're doing that emulate some of the efforts that you made. So we'd love to build on that success. I want to open this up. If you have a few more moments, I know that we may have a question or two for you. If you are here and you have a question, please either raise your hand, your virtual hand, or go ahead and type in the chat box for Senator Rubio. I'll wait just a second. While we're waiting, do you mind elaborating a little bit on, I think it was SB 56 on the efforts for cities to achieve their RHNA goals? That's been a struggle for all of our cities. We're feeling overwhelmed and somewhat helpless in some cases. What would that bill do to help our cities?
Well, this is something that we started working on, as I shared with you last year. It was a different bill. It didn't, it was just a housing production bill, but it wasn't going to be allowed to be used towards the RHNA numbers. And so right now, that's the big shift from last year's bill to this year, and it's SB 6. And we're pushing very hard to allow any housing production that comes out of these bills to be included in the RHNA numbers. And there's a big debate. So that's why I'm very cautious, and I will really caution you to understand that there's a lot of work to be done before it gets to the finish line. And there's a lot of different points of views. And so we'll continue to push for any of these all this housing production to be included. So if you take advantage of any of these bills, they should be used towards the RHNA numbers, which I know a lot of my communities are complaining about, and that's a big challenge. They feel they don't have land, they feel they don't have the funding, and I get all those issues. So again, it's not fully cooked yet, as they say. So please be mindful that we're introducing the bills, but there's still a lot of negotiation that has to be had. So yes, we want to make sure that if you build anything, it should be counted towards your RHNA numbers.
Well, that's terrific, and we will watch it, and hopefully it can be a bill that we can look to endorsing and supporting you and your efforts. If you have one more minute, I don't see any other hands raised, so I will take this opportunity to acknowledge that you were recently featured in a New York Times article on some efforts that you made around domestic violence definitions, and that recently went into law at the first of the year. Do you mind elaborating a little bit on that to the extent that you're comfortable? I really admired your leadership in speaking out on that and also turning it into law to help protect other women in similar circumstances. So if you have a moment to elaborate, I'm sure we would appreciate that.
Of course. So I will share really quickly 3 bills that I introduced my first year. Number one, as an educator, this was very important to me. I've now mandated that every ID card in schools from 7th grade all the way to upper education has the National Domestic Violence Hotline on the back of the ID card. So if you have children, turn that card around and you might see it. So that's number one. And I really did. I remember being a fourth grade teacher, and I remember seeing some of the behavior, the patterns that lead to later in life, abuse. And so I felt that we needed to give our youth a number to reach out to. And even if it's not them, if they see their parents or something happening around them, they always have that number at their fingertips. So now it's law, and it should be written on every ID cards in schools. The second one that I passed was something that I find it's always challenging for victims to come forward, because everyone has an expectation that the minute it happens, someone should be able to speak up. And through research and speaking to so many victims, in my own personal experience, I know firsthand that everyone heals in different ways. Everyone comes to their own internal, situation at different times. And so the law in California allowed victims only 3 years to come forward and speak up about their violence and press charges. And so through studies, we know a lot of victims, take up to 10 years, 15 years. Again, it's not a formula. Everyone comes to the conclusion that they're ready to speak up at different times. So I changed the law to extend the statute of limitations 2 more years. I really started, I wanted 10 years. I passed it through the Senate, but when it got to the Assembly, there's a few challenges and they brought it down to only 5 years. But we're okay with that. Anything that we can do on that front is a success for any victim out there. The third bill that was groundbreaking is, and we were one of the first states to have that law. And I will say this because I know I have a lot of friends on this call who are parents. And if you happen to be a parent, one of the things that I want to say is that the coercive control piece is something that we've never really discussed as it pertains to domestic violence. We always think of domestic violence as a broken bone, a black eye, bruises on the body. And so again, as parents, I'm sure that's probably what you're looking at if you see your child have a boyfriend or girlfriend. Coercive control now defines domestic violence as other things such as monitoring someone's finances, monitoring people's communications. I do talks all the time at high schools, and I'll ask the question, raise your hand if your boyfriend has ever taken your phone away. And it's like the entire stadium puts their hand up. And I always tell them that's abuse. No one has the right to take anything. That's your personal property. So coercive control now allows victims to use coercive control patterns in court as domestic violence. That wasn't the case before. You needed to show, again, the bruise and the black eye. Now they can show patterns of coercive control, either evidence that they've been monitored, that they've been kept away from family and friends. Sometimes, I've spoken to victims where the abusers will ruin their finances, and that keeps them there because they're not able to go get an apartment or fend for themselves. So coercive control is everything that takes your liberty away, that you don't have a choice. And so now it's in statute, and victims can now use not only the black eyes and the bruises, but coercive control, controlling behavior as supporting evidence in the court. So that was a big, like I said, a break in the way we see domestic violence. And it was, like I said, California and Hawaii, I think were one of the first to define it. And so I'm very proud of that. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you for giving us that update and your trailblazing leadership in that area. We're so appreciative of that. And I know that our time is running out here, but I want to let you know in the chat box, you have a lot of fans that are thanking you for your leadership and your service. And I just really want to express to you that we're so appreciative of your inclusive and empathetic leadership and your efforts prioritizing local control, looking towards creative solution, and thoughtfully looking at how we achieve our housing goals, working on efforts on how we can support our schools and children. And just thank you so much for taking the time and being here with us today. We're so grateful. Thank you, Senator Rubio.
Well, thank you. And whenever we can meet in person, please invite me. I will be happy to stop by in person and see all of you. And thank you for what you all do. So I really appreciate it, and enjoy the day. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. And Marcel, our next guest, do we see that Assemblymember Reggie Jones-Sawyer?
He has joined us.
Oh, terrific. Wonderful. All right, everyone. Last but not least, I have the pleasure of introducing Assemblymember Jones-Sawyer. Serving as the voice of the people of California's 59th district in the state assembly, Reginald Byron Jones-Sawyer Sr. was first elected to the state legislature in November of 2012. The district he represents encompasses a wide range of diverse, culturally rich, and dynamic communities. It includes neighborhoods of South Los Angeles, Florence Firestone, Walnut Park, and a portion of Huntington Park. Assemblymember Jones-Sawyer takes great pride in representing his district and has worked hard to put local neighborhoods first. He played a key role in California's economic recovery, helped invest more in local neighborhood schools while making higher education more affordable and accessible. He's advanced job creation policies, pushed for protections for immigrants, and he spearheaded forward-thinking policies that promote both public safety and also enhancing equity and justice in our criminal justice system to make it more fair and transparent for all communities. In the legislature, Assemblymember Jones-Sawyer is the chair of the Public Safety Committee and chair of the Select Committee on the Status of Boys and Men of Color. With 2 sons and a grandson of his own, the Assemblymember holds his responsibility as chair of the Status of Boys and Men of Color close to his heart. Most recently, he secured $37.3 million in the 2018-2019 California state budget to establish the Youth Reinvestment Fund. This fund will help improve the outcomes of vulnerable youth populations by using trauma-informed community and health-based interventions in lieu of arrest, detention, and incarceration. Assemblymember Jones-Sawyer history of public service includes serving as the Director of Asset Management for the City of LA, Assistant Deputy Mayor for the City of Los Angeles, Chair of the Los Angeles County Small Business Commission, Vice President of SEIU Local 721, Los Angeles Professional Managers Association, and the statewide secretary of the California Democratic Party. He earned his bachelor's degree in public administration from USC and is the past president of the Black Alumni Association. He is the father of 3 children, Lauren, Reginald Jr., and Evan. And here is an interesting fact about the assembly member that you might not know. The Jones-Sawyer family members were early pioneers in the civil rights movement. His uncle, Jefferson Thomas, was one of the Little Rock 9 high school students. These brave students faced violent mobs in their fight to integrate an all-white high school in 1957, one of the most important and documented civil rights events in our nation's history. Please join me in a warm welcome to our Assemblymember Jones-Sawyer. Thank you for being here, Assemblymember.
Thank you. I need to bring you whenever I go to a meeting. Introduce me.
Anytime.
It's a pleasure to be with you. Let me just start with I worked for the city of Los Angeles for 25 years. And so when it comes to local government and city, that's where my bread and butter, that's where I got trained. And I like to tell people I'm basically a bureaucrat at heart. So I can talk smack about bureaucrats, and because I am one. Now I'm an elected official. And there are things that elected officials used to do. My favorite thing that they used to do would make laws, and then they would hand it off to me to make happen. And a lot of times they wouldn't give me enough money, resources to ever get it done. And then when it blew up, guess who got the blame? And so I work real hard to make sure that cities, no matter what laws we put together, I work real hard that it's not an unfunded mandate. Because I didn't like it when it happened to me. And I darn should made a commitment to make sure it never happened to anyone else. And so it's definitely a pleasure to be here, especially during this really harsh time of COVID, which is the #1 issue right now. No matter what anybody else says, we've got to conquer this. And when we do, and we will, we'll be able to tell our grandchildren and great-grandchildren what it was like during the great pandemic of 2020 in 2021. So I didn't know, I don't know what the format. I jumped on, I've been running. So if someone kind of guide me. Otherwise, we'll be talking, elected officials will keep talking forever. You got to give us some boundaries. Otherwise,
I'll
you'll be
give
here
you,
tomorrow.
no problem, Assemblymember. Happy to give you those boundaries. Why don't you give us an update on your priorities for this year, as far as any bills you may be introducing, or any areas that you're really honing in on and focusing for this year?
So right now, the number one thing, it really is COVID. In South Los Angeles, which I represent, mostly Latino and African American constituents, we're not getting first we weren't getting the testing kits, and then eventually we created a system that not only get the testing kits, but I've been passing out food and supplies and PPEs to everyone in my community. And now when we're getting to a solution where we can actually get vaccinated, I'm trying to work closely with the counties and the state to make sure that they get to our communities. It just drives me nuts that we already have in place, like you in each of your cities, that you've given out foods through the school system. We already have a mechanism to do it, and somehow we're not tapping into that. And so I wish that we could do more. Instead of sending people to one big mega center, we can actually get it to people near their homes, so we can vaccinate them. I told someone, if we can do bookmobiles and we can do blood drives where they actually go into the community and vaccinate, why can't we put those Meals on Wheels and all of those to flip them into maybe being that? We can do we can even use where the hotspots are. And obviously I can't do it. I'm not a techie person, but we can map out where the hotspots are, where the need for the vaccines are, and we could send them directly to them on a mobile. And also, I'm trying to get the governor to energize the National Guard. Look, the military, and I used to be emergency preparedness. I did logistics, and I've seen the National Guard in action, especially ours. These are phenomenal people. They will be able to vaccinate on a large scale with their doctors, with their medical, with their mass units and everything. But most important, they can provide security. So there won't be any cutting in line. They provide both security, the medical, and they have the organizational logistics struggle that anybody's ever been in the military will tell you. They are phenomenal in that. So in some ways, it's pushed a lot of things that I really wanted to do to the side, because this is our number one concern right now, to make sure that we get this done and handled so we can get our economy back on track. We can get funding to the cities because of the revenue that they lost. And most important, we can just like stabilize California again so we can get back to where we need to be. I'm chair of public safety. So every day since we got back, I'm hearing of bill ideas. And so I've been swamped with a lot of bill ideas in public safety, kind of looking at things like, and one of my bills is looking at how many, because of what happened on 1/6 January with the storming of the Capitol, and finding out that there are a lot of white supremacists here in California. There are a lot of them that are in the military that were in there. There are a lot of them that were in law enforcement. And so we really do need to look and find out and ferret out those individuals that hate and are white supremacists or Klan members. We need to ferret them out of law enforcement. That 1% or that 0.5% that are like that, we need to get them out. They make the entire law enforcement look bad. And we need to work in partnership with the ones that want to move on to better law enforcement, so that they're respected again, so that when someone sees them in a uniform, not only are they respected, but they know what they needed to do to get in, and we build back what it was like in many cases when I was a little kid, that we were in youth centers. I was in PAL boxing. as you can tell, I wasn't very good at boxing, but I had, I put on the gloves and I did the best I could. But I was just like Muhammad Ali. I was mentored by a lot of law enforcement to grow up and learn, some of the life skills that you need to make it. And so, how do we get back? How do we really get back to that so that we can build a community that we're all working together? And then the other thing is, this is just a shameless plug, as was mentioned before, I will be the new incoming chair of the Select Committee of Boys and Men of Color. After a recess of not being on it, if you look at your taxes, this is to each of you and anybody else when you do your taxes, at the bottom of the charitable list is the End the School to Prison Pipeline donation. That's something I put in so we could raise money so we can deal with trauma-informed care, so that we can get to young people early. Like my parents were divorced when I was 7. I'm pretty sure there was a lot of trauma I was experiencing. I got lucky. I had law enforcement. My mother was really strong, and I had a lot of uncles and people that kind of gave me that wraparound service that I needed so that I could grow up. Some of you probably say, unfortunately, I became an elected official, but I was a really good administrator when I was with the city of LA. And we could stem a lot of the problems that we're having now at the beginning when it comes to youth that are that have trauma. In my mind, when I met this young 13-year-old kid in juvenile detention, and I asked him what he did, he wouldn't tell me. Later on, someone told me, and he's a young white kid, and he wasn't that big, and he was like the nicest kid I ever met. And when they pulled me outside, they told me, well, we can't tell you what he did, but I will tell you that this little kid had raped his sister and killed her. What kind of trauma do you have to go through as a little boy that makes you do something? I don't believe, I saw the movie The Bad Seed, but I don't believe these kids come out that way. Something triggered in him, and we really need to give them a lot of help. And if we take care of the front end, we will see the crime rate go way, way down. And hopefully they become, for me as an elected official, they become taxpayers. They pay sales tax. They pay, and I guess for you, that you're concerned about, that they pay property taxes, and that they contribute into the general fund of all of our cities, so that all of our cities become thriving ones. And you're not expending a whole lot of money and resources on repairs or dealing with crime. That your cities can talk about things that are much more important, which is schools and making sure everybody's on track. And so that's kind of where we are right now. I'm looking at just some things about nonprofits, and I don't have anything against nonprofits, but there's a big push, whether it's from taking money from probation and giving it to nonprofits. And so I don't want to make, I'm just saying this because I got beat up one time where I said, let's not take all the money from existing organizations until we've proved that when we give it to nonprofits, that they will be able to do what they say they're going to do, and that we audit them. Now, when I mentioned audits for nonprofits, scared the bejesus out of them. And I had, the counties calling me saying that I was going to destroy the whole system. I was just trying to make sure that if we're going to take the money out of the normal cities and counties, we need to make sure it's spent correctly, and that ultimately, if they're not spending it correctly, we take that money and then plow it back to services, to organizations, or to local governments that actually have been successful at these programs. We need to treat it like a business. That's all I'm saying. We need to treat it like a business. So I saw Stacy jump back on, so I'll be quiet.
Thank you, Assemblymember, for that update. We definitely don't want you to be quiet. If you have another minute or two, I'd love for you to stick around to answer a question. Do you have another moment?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Terrific. If you have any questions for the Assemblymember, please raise your virtual hand or go ahead and type it in the chat box. We've had some thank yous for your leadership and compassion and empathy. Assemblymember in the chat box. And while we're waiting for any hands to raise, I want to acknowledge that you were awarded the Legislator of the Year by Habitat for Humanity of the Greater Los Angeles area. And, you know, I wanted to talk to you for a moment about, and it's related to housing. I mean, we have representatives from a lot of cities on this call. We are looking at a regional housing trust to help us achieve fulfilling our RHNA numbers. What are your thoughts, generally speaking, on regional trusts where cities within a small region would work together to achieve their RHNA goals?
So let me just start out with when people talk about housing, I know many want to build as many units as possible. I'm a firm believer in building housing, like a house that ultimately someone, especially lower economic scale, can own and hopefully pass on intergenerationally. So we're also passing on wealth. I want to create a system where it's long term, and we build up our neighborhoods with houses. And I know the people who like to build multi-family apartments and things of that nature kind of get mad at me. But I think at the end of the day, if we teach wealth management, in addition to that, the fact that you're going to take care of your property and bring up the whole community as one, it's just as important as building, you know, a 40-unit low-income housing development. You need that too, because we got to put as many people in housing as possible. Where we fail is we're not talking effectively to communities about how we can make this work for them. And I think that's where a lot of the problem is. In LA, for example, in my district, we built more affordable housing than any of the other 14 city council districts. And while it's definitely needed, there are other places that need it too, that they're not doing as well. And I think it's not because they don't want to build it. It's just that we don't have a real good conversation about what works for that neighborhood, and so that we can build together. I get the feeling that's what the problem is when I hear this city's not doing anything, this city wants to do this, or this one don't want to do that, or how do you disperse the money, or do they leave the money, which is, I think, is really hard. They keep the money in your bank account or your savings account, and you don't spend it. So that's, you know, how do we get you to spend it and help us with this housing crisis?
Well, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. That is extremely helpful. And I realize that the time keeps ticking away, and I don't want to lose our audience, as I thank you so much, Assemblymember, for taking the time to be with us here today. We are so lucky to have such thoughtful, dedicated leaders like you representing us, but we're especially grateful for your commitment to equity and justice reform and your commitment to our youth. I can't thank you enough, and thank you so much for spending some extra time with us today.
Thank you, and this was great. So anytime you have a question or want to get to my office, feel free to call.
We appreciate that so much. Looking forward to see you in person one day soon.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Take care.
Take care.
And we have one more piece to our afternoon here, but before we get there, because I see that I know that everyone has to get on with their day, I just really wanted to thank everyone for joining us today and for the previous 3 weeks of our virtual Sacramento legislative tour. I want to extend our gratitude to our president for her tremendous leadership, and thank you especially to our staff, without whom we would have none of these legislative sessions. Jorge Morales, Ali Hernandez, Mayra Bonilla, Azalea Bonegas, and of course, Marcel Rodarte. Thank you so much for so seamlessly organizing each of these events for our association. I certainly hope that you have found our virtual tour informational and informative, and I'm really looking forward to the day where we can safely do this again in person. Of course, until then, I hope everyone stays safe and has a great afternoon. But right now, I'll toss it over to Marcel for any of his closing remarks.
Thank you, Stacy. Real quick, I want to make an announcement for you all that are still on. I know they're dropping like flies now, but we're going to be doing our local advocacy day, which would have been in March. It would have been sort of a 3-quarter day, but we're going to do it similar to this. It's going to be over several weeks where we'll focus on really the LA County aspect of what we do when we advocate for policy. We're going to hear from the sheriff and the DA. We're going to try to get those folks both together at the same time to kind of give us a little back and forth as what they see future for public safety in LA County. We're going to get the new CEO for LA County, Supervisor Solis, who is now the chair of the board, and also Supervisor Holly Mitchell, who is a new, makes up the 5th elected woman on the board, which is historical. So a bunch of historical stuff, and we're going to get them all in front of you to speak to you about policy that's specific to LA County. So please join us for that in March. And a quick announcement about our annual conference. And for those of you that are still wondering, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to hold it in person because of the COVID restrictions. We are working on something in September that may be sort of a replacement for our annual conference. We will do something, hopefully, laws permitting, in September that will be in person. But so stay tuned for that. And I don't know if any of the Gonzalvi are on. I know we were going to have them just give us a quick insight as to what to expect up in Sacramento. I think we have a good sort of tone. I haven't seen any of them on. So if you're on, speak up, or if not, we'll just end the session and I'll hand it back to Stacy. Okay, I don't hear or see from them. We'll invite them back to talk to us at a board meeting or something like that in the future. With nothing else for me, back to you, Stacy.
All right. Thank you, Marcel. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I think that's it. I hope you all have a great afternoon, and stay safe in the meantime until we can see each other again in person. Thank you all for attending.